This is a video about structuring your SA2, the rhetorical analysis. So I've got about 10 points here that I'm going to go through that'll help you think about how to actually structure it. And this is in terms of like introductions, bodies, things of that nature, but also things that are good just format for the rhetorical analysis, but also things that students who have done this before in the past have maybe not been as successful with as well. The first thing I would end up saying is I would think of this as, most likely in high school you were taught the format of the 5-paragraph essay. Now, 5 paragraphs, a lot of times it literally is kind of like paragraph, paragraph. We're thinking here of sections rather. So it'll most likely have an introduction, it'll most likely have a body, it'll most likely have a conclusion as well. The body sections should end up having topic sentences that tie back to your thesis. They should end up kind of like a topic sentence should then also tell the reader what you plan to do within that section as well. I wouldn't say do a paragraph. I would probably say do it a section, because it might end up being that you're talking about ethos and pathos. And so there's a ethos section that maybe has a couple of paragraphs in it, and then there's a pathos section that's got a couple of paragraphs in it as well. Remember that one of the goals of this assignment is that it is thesis driven. So you do need to give your audience a clear thesis as to what you plan to analyze within the text. I would probably format it in either is effective or is not effective. So Hitchens effectively uses pathos. Hitchens does not effectively use pathos. Or maybe it's a mixed bag. So maybe he does this well but does not do this well. That might be the format for this as well. I would also suggest that most likely you have a brief description of what's going on in the essay itself. So in the same way with the thing project, you gave a brief description of what the thing looked like, neutral, non-judgmental, and verifiable. You want to do the same thing here. So you want to give us maybe a short part of a paragraph that's talking about what Hitchens is doing, why he's doing it, and for what reason. Neutral, non-judgmental, and verifiable. So the first thing is let's think about this idea of the use of I here. So again, we've talked about that in WD 103. It's a genre class, and so that some genres may be more or less effective or a toolbox, might be more or less effective. So first person was super effective in essay 1, but here maybe less so. I'm not saying that you can't use it, but if you should use the first person only if you become a stand-in for the audience itself. So if Hitchens writes about the wet animal paw, I felt claustrophobic in the same way that a reader would as well. Now, I think if you're only doing it once, however, in the text, that may be less effective as well. So that's kind of those things. It's like, right, if I only do it one time in the entire text and everything else is kind of third person, then maybe I don't want to do that. Think about a title for your essay as well. So you don't want it just to be SA2, a rhetorical analysis. I mean, if you're going to talk about ethos, talk about that. If you're going to talk about tone or audience, it could be Christopher Hitchens' use of audience and Believe Me, It's Torture. I mean, even that, that's not the most sophisticated or wowy title, but it does tell the audience what you're going to do. You're going to look at audience in it as well. So craft a good title that'll help prepare your audience for your topic. So, and this will be true for almost every essay we're going to write this quarter as well, is an introduction. A lot of times what I refer to is will be a cold start introduction or a cold opening, where it's just literally you dive in and the first sentence is a rhetorical analysis of Christopher Hitchens' essay shows that blah, blah, blah. You want to prepare your audience. Now, the other thing you want to be careful of is you want to talk about your topic, not Hitchens' topic. So if you're literally starting off, the first thing is like torture is terrible, and oh my God, I can't believe we're torturing people, then maybe that's not the best way to begin, because your topic is some rhetorical technique. Maybe it's audience, maybe it's ethos, maybe it's pathos. So maybe what your introduction would do, and remember an introduction goes from general to specific, and the specific in this case is the Hitchens essay, or it's the use of ethos in the Hitchens essay, or it's the use of tone in the Hitchens essay. So you want to start with thinking about that. Tone can be important as it sets the, overall expectation for the audience in a piece of writing. Maybe that's the first sentence right there. And then we come down to the specific of your example as well. You do want to have the author's name and the title of the work somewhere in the introduction. So you do, and that's kind of just a standard. Where it ends up being is that Christopher Hitchens writes in his 2008 essay, "Believe Me, It's Torture," that. So, and also remember that in this case, "Believe Me, It's Torture" is going to be the title of the essay, so it's going to be in quotation marks as well. So that's that you want to have at least that kind of identifying factor within it as well. You want to keep a fairly narrow scope in your analysis. Don't try to do too much. I get it. People are going to be like, oh, I'll go do ethos, pathos, and logos. I'll do tone. I'll do audience. I'll do word choice. I'll do some structure as well, because then I'll be sure to have something to write about. But the best ones, the best rhetorical analysis generally are going to do one or maybe two things in depth. So maybe you only look at ethos, or maybe you only look at pathos, or maybe you only look at tone, or only look at audience as well. What you can do is sometimes maybe you can think of, are there different types of ethos in the paper or different types of pathos? So maybe then you can subdivide it this way. And then each one of these different types ends up having a section or a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs within it that talks about it. But yeah, so you don't want to do like you're skimming a rock across the surface of a pond where it's just touching on the surface, but doing a lot of things. You want to do one or two things in depth to really kind of give us an understanding. Make sure that you are giving textual examples to support things that you notice in the text. So if you just say, it's like, here's ethos. I think I say this a little bit again, but I'll say it again. You need to then provide direct quotations, quotation marks used within the text itself, to back up these assertions. However, be really careful about how much quotation you're using. I get it. This is if I go in and there's like block quotation, block quotation, block quotation, block quotation, that's going to, up the word count so that you have to write less. But ultimately, it ends up not working as well because you're not explaining things out. Don't think that the quote replaces your analysis. Matter of fact, you probably want to quote a couple of small words, maybe a short sentence, and then explain out. So generally my rule of thumb is for every line of quote, there probably ought to be 3 lines of explanation, explaining out how this works. You do need to cite for citations for the quotations. Don't use them for this paper unless you use an outside source. Definitely put it in quotation marks, Hitchens writes, comma, begin quotation, things like that. But don't worry about the parenthetical citation. That's the thing with the page number at the very end. We're going to assume that the audience will have it here and can look at it as well. So they don't necessarily need to have that. And we haven't gone through that. That'll be actually something we do for SA4 as well. So unless you use an outside source, and I would probably recommend that you probably shouldn't as well. Do you need to, you do need to explain how the rhetorical element works. A lot of times what people do is like, Hitchens uses pathos here, and then they don't explain it. They don't explain how it works. So if it's like, why is this pathos? Why is this logos? Why is this ethos? How does it work to persuade the audience? So you need to explain that out to your audience as well. If you're just pointing, that's not going to be enough. And then finally, the question I get a lot is, do you actually need to use the terms ethos, pathos, and logos? No, not necessarily. You could use, emotion. You could use logic. You could use credibility for ethos as well. Those do work, but there are the formal terms of ethos, pathos, and logos available. So kind of, keep that in mind. Hope my last thing about ethos is, remember, ethos, don't say ethos is ethics. Similar words, but they mean different things. Ethos, remember, has to do with credibility. It's the appearance of the writer themselves, but not their ethical stance. That's not what we're talking about here. All right, I hope this was helpful.